Well, people did say they always wanted a merging of the DCEU and the MCU. Well, you got Falcon, you got Mantis, Black Manta, and Merc. So, Striking Vipers is the first episode of the latest season of Black Mirror, which is season 5. And if you don't know what Black Mirror is, it's basically a sci-fi anthology series that deals with the ever-growing potential problems of technology if technology does go unchecked. And each episode is a standalone episode, so if you've never seen a single episode of Black Mirror and you just randomly picked one episode to watch, you wouldn't be lost. For this particular video though, as it says in the title, I'm only going to talk about Striking Vipers, which is episode 1 of season 5. Now that doesn't mean you shouldn't watch the rest of season 5. I definitely think you should check out the rest of season 5. But in my opinion, they're just not as good as this first episode. But this is a warning. For this episode, I'm talking full spoilers for episode 1, season 5 of Black Mirror, Striking Vipers. So if you haven't seen Striking Vipers and you don't want to hear what the episode was about and my thoughts about it, then click off this video. But if you have seen Striking Vipers or you don't care about spoilers, then continue to watch. So, Striking Vipers opens up in a club and you see Anthony Mackie's character, Danny, who's trying to pick up a girl named Theo, and it turns out this girl is played by Nicole Bahari. And I was excited when I saw her because this is the first time I've seen Nicole Bahari in anything since Sleepy Hollow, and I've always been a fan of hers since that show. Like, the first season of Sleepy Hollow was gold and it became one of my favorite shows, and I always felt like her star definitely needed to shine because she was a great part of what made Sleepy Hollow as awesome as it was, and it was super dirty what they did to her and her character in that show. And ultimately, I'm glad it got canceled. Anyway, it turned out that Danny and Theo actually knew each other and they're roommates, and you get introduced to another character played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, who's wearing a terrible ass looking wig. Like, what's up with them putting black men in these terrible ass looking wigs? They did the same thing to Corey Hawkins in The Walking Dead. Yeah, that wig was trash. So anyway, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II is playing a guy named Carl. And Carl, Danny, and Theo are all friends in college. And while in college, Carl and Danny would often bond over a video game called Striking Vipers, which is basically that universe's version of Street Fighter. And just like with most gamers, especially when it comes to fighting games, they each have main characters that they enjoy playing. Carl enjoys playing Roxette, which is basically that universe's version of Chun-Li, and Danny enjoys playing Lance, which is basically a knockoff of Ryu. So after it introduces the game and them playing it, it jumps 11 years later, and Theo and Danny are married and they have kids, and it's Danny's birthday. And while Danny is at his birthday celebration, you can see that something is off with him. Like, he seems disconnected. Like, it reminded me of the musical episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where Danny is basically just going through the motions. And Carl eventually arrives at his birthday party, and they hadn't seen or spoken to each other in a while because, you know, being adults sometimes gets in the way of communicating with your friends. And while there, Carl decides to give him a birthday present, and that's the updated version of Striking Vipers called Striking Vipers X. But this version of Striking Vipers is completely different in that it is an entirely virtual reality game, and whoever plays it goes full Bran Stark with the white eyes while they're in the video game world. So they end up playing the game, and naturally Danny picks his main character Lance, who's now played by Ludi Lin, and Carl picks his main character Roxette, who's played by Palm Clementieff. And with it being full virtual reality, they now feel every kick, every punch, every jump. Basically, when you're in the game, you feel all physical sensations. As soon as Carl said in the game you feel all physical sensations, I was like, uh-oh, I think I know where this is going. So they start fighting, and Carl, who's been playing Striking Vipers for way longer, starts kicking Danny's ass. And then they cut to Danny in the real world. He's jerking and twitching as he's feeling these attacks in real life. But to prevent somebody from feeling real physical and emotional trauma in real life, they instantly heal. And as the fighting continues, Danny starts to refamiliarize himself with the game and the fighting mechanics. You see, he starts fighting back and he's blocking the attacks. And there's a moment that's reminiscent of Lion King and how Nala always pins Simba, where Roxette's avatar pins Lance to the ground. Then they just look at each other for a quick second, and then Roxette kisses Lance. And Lance kisses her back for a little bit until he realizes what's going on, and then he freaks out, which makes Carl / Roxette freak out, and Roxette exits the game, which causes Danny Lance to exit the game, and they both sit there for a second looking super confused. And so was I, because even though I said, uh-oh, I know what's gonna happen, I was still like, what just just happened? And so I'm sitting there like, so are they bisexual? Are they realizing that they're gay? But then I'm like, but it's technically not gay because Danny is in this world as Lance. He's still a man and he's ultimately having sex with a woman. Yeah, that female avatar is being controlled by his best friend who's a guy, but he's still having sex with a woman. However, regardless of whatever happened in that world, it caused Danny to become aroused. Let me jump back. Before Danny started playing Striking Vipers with Carl, his wife wanted to have sex and he was saying, oh, I'm super tired, I'm not in the mood. And so they didn't. And that's when he went to go play Striking Vipers with his friend. But then after they made out in the video game, he was ready to go because when he got back in bed, his wife noticed that he had an erection. And she's like, oh, where'd this come from? And so they ended up having sex. What she didn't know is that erection was for his best friend, who was a guy, but technically not. It's all confusing. And so then you see Danny going through his day. You can tell he's thinking about what happened. He's confused. And then he ends up back playing this boring Tetris game that he normally plays, which you know he was on that game hoping that he would see Carl online, because that's exactly what happened. It said Carl is online and he invited him again to play Striking Vipers. And they have a conversation. But yeah, basically they're just making excuses like, oh yeah, I was super drunk. Like it's not gonna happen again. And they're like, yeah, it didn't mean anything. And I'm like, I've heard that before. So they get back into the game. They pick the same exact characters. And this time around, they don't even fight. Like they walk closer to each other. And then as soon as they get close, they just start fucking. And I'm just like, well, okay. Then they skip to after the sex and they're putting their clothes back on. And Carl as Roxette makes the joke that, well, I guess we're both gay now. And so that freaks Danny out. And so Carl basically responds like, I'm joking. And Danny's just like, well, it doesn't feel like a gay thing. And I'm like, I agree because you're having sex with a woman. But I'm just like, but for Carl, I think it's probably more of a gay thing because yeah, it's a man and woman having sex. But at the end of the day, Carl is having sex as a woman with another guy. And so at the end of the day, he is still kissing another guy. He is still finding another guy attractive. Also, when they're having sex, does she go down on him? Does she give him a blowjob? Does she jerk him off? I don't know. Even if he's not doing that as a woman, he's still being penetrated by another man. So it's kind of gay. And so yeah, for the rest of the episode, Danny and Carl are meeting in the game world to have sex. And you eventually see that the connection between them is beyond just the physical, because at a certain point, you see them in the game world and they're cuddling with each other. Danny as Lance is stroking Carl as Roxette's hair, and they're talking and they're caressing each other and they're embracing each other lovingly. And he's connecting with Carl as Roxette in the video game world on a way more intimate and deeper level than he's really connected with anybody in the real world. Going back to that first scene where his birthday was, you could see he felt very disconnected, but in here he feels very connected to Carl, to the point that that's now affecting his real life relationships. Like he forgets his and his wife's wedding anniversary. So Theo and Danny have dinner one night on the night of their wedding anniversary that he forgot, and she finally confronts him because they haven't had sex in a while and he keeps making the excuse that he's tired, he doesn't have the energy to have sex. And she comes back at him that it's more than just the sex, even the small stuff that he usually did to show that he cared, like touching the small of her back when he walked past her, kissing her. He doesn't do any of that anymore. And so she's wondering what's going on. Is it another woman? Is it her? She starts thinking it's because maybe her body doesn't look the way it used to look. And he keeps saying, no, it's not you. There's nothing going on. And that scene was great because of the acting, not only just from Anthony Mackie, but from Nicole Beharie. Like she killed this scene. And again, I say, I swear she needs to be in more things. Like someone put her in another sci-fi fantasy show and do better by her than they did in Sleepy Hollow. I'm still bitter about what happened with Sleepy Hollow. Like how often do you see black women leading in sci-fi fantasy shows? Anyway, I gotta stop before I go on a rant about Sleepy Hollow, and that's not what this video is about. Woosa. So Danny tries to assure her that nothing is going on, and so to try to do better by his wife, he tries to cut it off with Carl. And at this moment, this is where you see that Carl is way more addicted to the relationship between him and Danny than Danny is. He tries to tell Carl like, well, they don't have to cut it off completely. Maybe they can meet once a month or every so often. And that's when Danny takes a stand, is like, no more. And it also kind of goes back to what a conversation that Carl and Danny had in the video game world, where Danny asked Carl, how does it feel to have sex as a woman? And he says, well, having sex as a man is like a guitar solo. A guitar solo is awesome, but as a woman, it feels like a quote, a fucking whole orchestra. Which I mean, I guess makes sense because from a scientific standpoint, they say women have more powerful orgasms and also longer orgasms orgasms than men. So even I would be curious to see what it would feel like to have an orgasm as a woman, because hell, I would love to have longer orgasms. I believe women can orgasm up to 50 seconds, but men can last only up to like 30 seconds. That's an extra 20 seconds of orgasms. Like, what? I'd be addicted to that feeling too. Shit. But basically, there you have it, guys. If you want to know what it feels like to have an orgasm as a woman, I guess go listen to a live orchestra. Not the same thing, but whatever. So after cutting off with Carl, the episode jumps about 7 months later. You see Theo is several months pregnant, and it's Danny's birthday again. And so what does Theo do? She invites Carl over, because at the end of the day, they are best friends and they were roommates in college. Plus, I felt that Theo knew there was something going on with the two of them. She might not have necessarily known exactly what was going on, and she might not have known the two of them were ultimately having sex, but I'm pretty sure she knew there was some type of animosity or tension developing between them. And that became even more obvious when the three of them were having dinner together and Danny and Carl would be super awkward and silent around each other. Theo eventually walks away from the kitchen table to go clean up the dishes, and that's when Carl confronts Danny again, basically saying like, please come back to the video game. Like, he basically says to Danny like the sex between the two of them was the best sex he's ever had in his life, and he knows it was the best sex that Danny ever had in his life, and he tried to substitute that by having sex with other people in the game. Like, he had sex with the AI in the game, but the AI wasn't equipped to have sex, so it was boring. It just laid there. Then he tried to have sex with other people that were playing the game, and although one came close to hitting his spots, none of them hit him the way Danny did. He even had sex with somebody picking the polar bear avatar. And at first I was like, whoa. And I'm still like, whoa. But then I thought about it even more. I was like, well, it is a human controlling an animal, but yet, and I'm like, granted, that's still weird, but at the same time, what's the difference between that and people rooting for Belle and Beast to get together and Beauty and the Beast? You know, Beast and Belle were having sex before he became human again. Also, what about Hank McCoy as Beast from X-Men? Is it weird if people have sex with him? Or what about Nightcrawler? We know Storm and Nightcrawler had a little fling at one point in the comics. Or Sabretooth. Granted, it's still nasty, but it's things that I thought about. Anyway, basically, Carl tells Danny that he knows he wants to get back into Roxette's meow. And that scene reminded me of the scene in Boomerang between Grace Jones and Eddie Murphy.
Oh, merde alors! I mean, I don't believe this. You are going to turn down a pussy like this? Staring you smack in your face? No man can turn down this pussy.
You stop.
I don't know any man that can refuse this pussy.
And so Carl eventually leaves, and he tells Danny he'll be logged into the game at midnight, and basically he expects Danny to be there. And so the next scene, you see Danny struggling because you know he wants to go back in that game, but at the same time he wants to do right by Theo. But then also at the same time, he feels a connection to Carl as Roxette that he's never felt before. And so eventually he gives into that temptation, and once midnight comes, he comes in the game and comes in Roxette. Which also begs the question. I said I have a lot of questions. I'm like, so obviously he must orgasm in the game, and they are anatomically correct. So does Lance ejaculate? And also, if he does ejaculate, can Roxette become pregnant with a virtual reality avatar baby? So after they have sex, Carl as Roxette accidentally says to Lance Danny that she loves him. And so that freaks Danny out. So he tells Carl to meet him at a certain spot in the real world, and then he exits the game. And so they meet at that spot, and Danny tells Carl that he wants Carl to kiss him because he has to know. He has to know if they're actually gay. If these emotions and this intimacy that they've been feeling and doing translates beyond just the game. And so after a few awkward moments, Carl finally kisses Danny, and they both look at each other and say, no sparks. And a part of me was just like, bullshit. Of course there's not going to be any sparks because this moment is super awkward. So I'm like, you mean to tell me you didn't feel absolutely anything? Because yes, there was the physical, and yes, Danny was having sex with a woman at the end of the day, but there was an emotional connection between the two of you. An emotional connection that obviously was not able to be replicated with anybody else. Now, I'm not saying that they're gay, at least not Danny. I think Carl is way more bi-curious than Danny is because, like I said, again, Danny is still having sex with a woman at the end of the day. But for Carl, he's still kissing another man. He's still having sex with another man. He's playing with another man's Elder Wand, feeling another man's Patronus charm as he Expelliarmus all over him. I'm sorry, I'm currently reading the Harry Potter books for the the first time. I'm on the Goblet of Fire right now, so Harry Potter is just all in my mind. I did see all the movies though. Anyway, so Danny's telling Carl, well, since we're not gay, since there's no sparks, that means we can stop doing this. Like, it doesn't mean anything. And Carl tries to tell him, like, no, it's different in the game. And Danny's like, no, you need to stop. You need to let it go. We need to live our lives separately. And so because Carl keeps pushing, you know how men do, they start fighting in the middle of the street. But you can't have two black men fighting in the middle of the streets and the cops not show up. So naturally, the cops did show up and they get arrested. And it's up to Theo to bail them out while they're in the car driving back home. At this point, she puts her foot down and wants to know what is going on. And so after some prodding, Danny finally tells her. We don't actually get to see that conversation, which I'm actually kind of bummed out about because I wanted to see, just like in Game of Thrones when the Starks found out that Jon was a Targaryen, I wanted to see the reaction of Arya. I wanted to see the reaction of Sansa. It's the same thing with Theo, Nicole Bahari's character. I wanted to see what her reaction was. So anyway, we then cut. I'm not sure how much time has passed. I'm assuming maybe it's his birthday again, but basically Danny, Theo, and Carl have now made an arrangement where I'm not sure if it's every year on his birthday or once a month, but basically they're giving each other a hall pass where Danny and Carl get to have as much sex as they want for that one day in the game, and Theo actually gets to go out in the real world to a club and have sex with any guy that picks her up. And I'm just like, I wonder which one is worse, because yeah, at the end of the day, Danny and Carl have this thing going on, but it's not real. Like, what Theo was doing is real. Like, Theo, there's no chance that Roxette can accidentally become pregnant. Maybe. There's a chance that Theo might get pregnant with another man's child. There's a chance that Theo may come home with an STD. But on the flip, you could say, well, what Carl and Danny have is way more emotional than it is physical. And they always say an emotional affair is way worse than a physical affair. So I don't know. And yeah, that's basically the end of the story. All I have to say is they need to hurry up and come up with this technology like ASAP, because I can tell you right now that there are a couple straight guys that I love to Roxette for. Also, I love how this episode explores black sexuality and black masculinity and also open relationships. That's something you don't really see that much within any type of film or genre or anything like that, especially when it comes to black people. And I'm like, maybe this show created a new sexuality that we may have to explore in the future once virtual reality does become a real thing. And then also in a world where robots become more and more advanced, because we already have sex bots becoming a thing where Danny and Carl, they're not heterosexual, they're not homosexual, they're not bisexual, but they're cybersexual. There was no moment in this episode where they decided to reverse roles, where maybe Danny played as a woman character and Carl played the male character. But also it goes to show that Danny felt an emotional attachment only with Carl, because there was never a moment where he went to his wife and offered to play the game with her and have sex with her in the video game world. It was always Carl. And in some ways it kind of makes sense because of this new dynamic entered into their relationship, that he was able to explore this connection that he had with Carl that he doesn't have with anybody else. That's why the terminology bromance exists, where two guys are basically so close, but the only thing is everything but romantic. And I mean, as a gay guy, I've heard myself from other straight guys where they said, if I were gay, I would totally date you and we would be a great couple. Or on the flip, like, if only you were a girl, I feel like we would be a great couple. Well, this video game gives people the opportunity to explore that. So yeah. But yeah, anyway, this video has gotten long enough, but I would give Striking Vipers a definite blockbuster. So have you seen Striking Vipers? What did you think about it? If this video game were actually real, would you use it? Would you play as the opposite gender? And do you think Carl and Danny were gay? Let me know down in the comment section below. Also, if you can, please hit that thumbs up button and like this video. It'll really help out the channel. And if you're new to my channel, please check out the other videos on my channel. If you like what you see, please subscribe for more and tell your friends, families, and neighbors about my channel to help me continue to grow. And as always, I'll catch you guys next time.